Okay. You're still muted, Edward. Your mic is muted. And we are live streaming.
Assalamu alaikum.
There
So
you
yes,
are.
I just set up the live stream.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and open up. Let me greet everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to American Muslim 360, the #1 Islamic broadcast platform in the nation, where your intellect is respected and your voice is protected. You're listening to the Internet Stranger program. I'm your host, Edward Willis. Appreciate everyone who is in attendance on Zoom as well as on YouTube. I want to, because of the limited time that we have this morning, let me make just a couple of announcements at the beginning of the show. Immediately following this broadcast, at the top of the hour, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 7 o'clock Central Time, we have Not Just Talk with my good friend and the host of that program, Michael Hameen. In addition, there are a couple of things that are happening in the community. One this weekend in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, honoring the 50th anniversary of the ministry and leadership of Imam W.D. Muhammad. I don't have the exact dates and times of all that program or the program itself to pull up, but that information is readily available. And if possible, I'll have it by the end of the program, or Michael Hameen will be able to share some of that information with you. Also, there's a couple of other things that are coming up quite expeditiously. I may get this date wrong, but I think I've got it right. November 15th, CWSC AM 360 with a telethon to benefit our operations. And then later in the year, in December, A Time to Be Grateful, which is an event honoring the work of the Muslim Journal, will be coming up as well. We'll have more information on that and exact dates and times and locations for you. My voice is a little weird. So there's a couple of things that I want to do tonight, and they involve videos. So if you will bear with me, I will start the very first video. We may not get as far into it as I would have liked, given the timing, but hopefully you will get something from this. So one quick moment while we set this up and see if we can get this going for you.
Sure. You're talking about this notion that you have in your book, which is terrific, about sort of how do you get to this minimal viable sort of place with your product before you hit scaling. So talk about the culture in that process a little bit for everybody.
So culture and people really do start with the founder, and it starts, though, with customer development in a very funny way. Because if you're a founder, you had to wake up in the morning with a vision and with a passion to bring that vision to reality. The bad news is that while you don't know it, I know it, you're more than likely hallucinating rather than having a vision. But let's just agree for a second, you might actually be having a vision.
Good coffee.
Right? And if you've seen that burning bush, you're just convinced that all you need to do is lead the people, through the desert and, take a left at, the burning bush and you'll be there 40 years later. But what you really need to know is there needs to be a little voice in the back of your head that says, what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? And because we're driven by passion, that's not natural.
Just a quick question. Is anyone able to see and hear the video?
Yes, and I'm very excited to engage this dude.
Okay, hold on. I'll get it started back again.
And your head needs to show a little bit more, Edward.
Okay.
Your head is cut off.
What I'm suggesting is actually the unnatural act.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you how it usually plays out and what I, in fact, now insist happen instead. What usually plays out is the founder hires a VP of sales. And VP of sales, Daniel, get on and go talk to those customers. Great.
Absolutely.
You talk to a bunch of customers, and you know what? They say, Daniel, this is the worst idea I've ever heard. And if you're a great head of sales, you'll talk to maybe 10 more just to make sure, and you come back to your CEO, and you tell him that if you're being honest. And what's his first reaction? His first reaction,
You're not listening.
yeah, you're not listening. You're not explaining it right? And
Right.
something tells me you actually worked for somebody like
Okay, it's
Question
there you go.
right up front, and we want you all to be paying attention and thinking of the questions that you want to bring forward, because that's a cornerstone of this conversation. But in the beginning,
Are you
there
going to
was-
ask hard questions?
I am.
All right.
In the
good.
beginning, there was Steve Blank, the entrepreneur, without a business degree. Imagine that. And so I'm going to ask the basic question about, over the course of the last 5+ years, what do you know? What do you really know now that you didn't have a clue about as you were starting off building businesses? And you've done 8 businesses of various sizes, shapes, forms, and levels of success.
I think, now you say it and it's intuitively obvious when you say it, but I never understood, and I think as an industry we never understood, that startups are not smaller versions of large companies. That's a huge idea. That is, we used to say, oh, large companies, they write business plans. Startups, you go write a business plan. Large companies, they write a 5-year plan. You startups write 5-year plans. Mm-hmm. By the way, never ever noticing that the only other people to do 5-year plans was the Soviet Union, and we know how well that turned out. Startups, large companies hire sales, marketing, and VP and biz dev on day one. You do that too. Never quite understanding that the distinction between a startup and a large corporation is that large companies, at its core, execute known business models. But startups do something very different. Startups, in their early days, are searching for a business model. And this distinction between search and execution is what we now know is very different between an early stage venture and an existing corporation.
So there's a lot of accumulated experience that goes into this distillation that you just really so nicely framed.
That's because I've gotten it wrong a lot.
He's gotten it wrong a lot. So that's the first thing. Startups fail a lot. So what's the core question that people should be searching for relative to the business model? Because as you point out, at the end of the day, the innovation process is about economic impact. So it has to have a foundation in a business model. So given that that's what's the first step?
So it used to be in the old days, plan, something you could kind of write in a library, right? It's, let's do a lot of market research and look for data and how big is this market and put together some PowerPoint slides. And by the way, let's have our quote financial plan in 5 years should say $100 million. I now tell my students that there's a secret Excel key code to auto-generate that. They're still looking for what those keys are. There's probably a lot of tech support calls into Microsoft, Daniel, just because of me. But in fact, what we now know is a plan is just a series because when I teach at Stanford, those students pay $50,000 a year and they need to tell their parents they learned something impressive, at least once a week. But outside of Stanford, a startup really is a series of untested guesses. It's a big idea. A startup is nothing more than a faith-based enterprise on day one. It's faith. It's truly faith. And what your job is, another insight, is to turn that faith into fact. Is to turn that passion and faith into facts as quickly as you can. And the organizing document I've adopted is not the business plan. It's something called a business model. And for the last 15 years, academics have argued, what the heck is a business? Two of us in a room and you come out with 9 definitions. But about 4 years ago, there was a guy in Switzerland, Alexander Osterwalder, who wrote a book called Business Model Generation. And if all of you don't have it, you should. It basically says, look, any company could be described as a series of 9 components. One is, what are you building? What's the product or service? He called that the value proposition. 2 is, who are you building it for? Customer segments. You know, how are you going to get the product from you to those customer segments? Channels. How are you going to create, get, keep, and grow? That is, how are you going to get customers, keep them, and grow them? We call that customer relationships. What's your revenue model? How are you going to make money? Do you need any partners? Are there any resources you need? Activities? And what are the costs? Every startup needs to answer those questions, ultimately to become a business. And the 2 most important on day 1 is, what am I making and for who? Which were started. I kind of thought, Daniel, this obviously just works for tech. That, you know, yeah, I've been in tech for, you know, decades, and people I teach are tech. But it dawned on me only in the last couple of years that this idea of business model design and something I'll talk about called customer development actually works for everything we do that's a new venture. More importantly, it works for not just the 1% in tech, but it works for the 99% on Main Street. That is, if today you go to the SBA.gov site, you know what they'll tell you? Here's how to write a business plan. It looks like the 1960s. And think about what that means. Is that, okay, write this document, you know, show me the market size, etc. Instead of saying, hey, you want to open up a restaurant? Maybe you ought to work in one for a while. You want to pick this location? Maybe you ought to stand on that corner for, like, you know, with a clipboard. That is, there is no notion that any experiential effect is necessary. So this process works for small businesses, and it also works for large corporations. As you well know, every major corporation in the 21st century is dealing with the issues of disruption.
Sure.
Right? Everybody. And the interesting thing is, disruption on day 1 looks like a toy. In fact, the apocryphal or semi-apocryphal story I heard when I was in Finland is the day the iPhone was announced and shipped, the Nokia board was meeting, and they had it flown by courier to the board meeting. And Nokia engineering had already built prototypes of, at least for hardware, something that looked close to the iPhone. And in fact, they were in the board asking for a couple $100 million commitment from the board to go make one just like it. Senior board member picked up the iPhone and asked the fatal question for Nokia. You know what it was?
No.
What's their market share?
Oh. Interesting.
What was their market share in day 1?
0.
Disruption on day 1 to a large corporation always looks like a toy. And so therefore, as a large corporation, you need a continual process to deal with not just sustaining innovation, as Clayton Christensen labeled 15 years ago, but you need a continual process to deal with disruption, because it's only going to get worse in the 21st century.
So when you think about customer development you brought up, do you have a particular view? I mean, in the age of the web and the internet, clearly there's ways to go about reaching an audience in a friction-free way, essentially for free and at scale. But then again, there's also, as you said, sort of standing on the corner if you want to go build a restaurant. What's the implication of the current state of technology on sort of any business development problem like this?
So let me put customer development in context.
Yeah, put it in that context.
So if you remember, I just talked about business models, right? Business model design, a company makes up 9 boxes, et cetera. That's great, and if you're like to do theory, you could sit in your office all day and draw up all the business model pieces.
It's buffering, Edward. It's frozen. There we go. No audio. Still buffering. Now, no visual or audio. Not hearing you, Edward. There you are. You're muted.
No, I was trying to reset.
No,
Did it stop?
it stopped. It was buffering. Then it stopped.
Okay.
No audio or visual.
Hold on.
Initial hypotheses are
There
more
you
than
go.
likely wrong, and that's going to be okay. But we're going
Audio's
to get
clear.
you out of the building physically or virtually if you're a web mobile app, and we're going to have you start interacting with customers as early as possible. And you're going to test two fundamental assumptions. One is your assumption about what the problem or need the customer has. Because when you started this company, inside your head you were going, yeah, we're going to solve X problem for them. Or if it's an entertainment product, oh, we're going to fulfill this need. Great, let's see if someone other than you shared that belief. And if they did, now we're going to test the second piece, which is, does your solution solve that problem or need? That cannot be done inside your office. To answer your specific question, web mobile cloud apps allow us to get that feedback incredibly rapid, at a scale and at a speed never imagined. But the same process also works for physical products. It just means you physically need to get out of the building, kiss your family goodbye because you're not going to see them for a while,
Right.
and then spend a lot of time talking to customers. But even if it's web mobile, I have a philosophy that says you haven't validated your hypotheses until you've seen potential customers' pupils dilate, right? That is, unless you see them going, right,
And you don't
personally, then all the market research stuff on the web, that's great. But unless you've cross-correlated that by having some percentage say, grab you by the collar and go, you're not leaving until I have this app in my hands or I have this product in my hands, you really haven't gotten valid customer data.
So do you do that in the open, or do you do that in kind of stealth mode, as
Right.
people talk about for startups? What's the right way to go about that?
Well, the right way is the only way I could get you to do it. But the
So you must go through
right.
this door.
Right. It turns out I teach this process not only to students but also for the National Science Foundation and people who have some serious technology who you would think they'd want to keep it all under wraps. One of the mistakes in thinking about this process assumes that what I want you to do is take your source code, your patents, and your firmware and share it with customers on day one. That's not what we're talking about at all. In fact, if we're doing that, we're doing way too much talking, and in fact, we're trying to sell something. My suggestion is we're not trying to sell anything at all. We're trying to do something that's very hard for an entrepreneur, and that's called listening, right? And that's called asking questions about what other people's needs are versus you trying to push, look, I just invented this. Don't you think it's great? And how many will you buy? Rather than tell me about your problems, or, gee, how do you solve them today? And so the customer development process is not about, how can I take all my IP and dump it on somebody's desk and say whether they like it. Does that?
Yeah, so this is the 2 ears and 1 mouth chapter or something like that?
Something like that.
Okay, right. You listen and ask good questions.
And by the way, for an entrepreneur, listening is the hardest possible thing you could learn how to do. Especially, I'll tell you what's even worse. Imagine you just got funded by the best VC firm in Silicon Valley, or even better, Microsoft loved your product.
Sure, we
right?
love it. We love this stuff.
And so you now think your slide deck or your idea has been blessed by God. right? Blessed by God. And in fact, the only thing you need to change from your funding deck, instead of asking, I need $4 million, you now put in a new slide that says, I need an order.
Yeah.
Because the slide deck has been blessed. When in fact, all you did was convince somebody who actually just had a nice cup of coffee and he had gotten a good night's sleep to give you a check.
Yeah.
Right? But you're now believing all you need to do, fatal mistake, is execute your plan. This is where startups go wrong. They believe because someone said, here's a check, all you need to do is hire people, and somehow magically, because you wrote down the words, the world will unfold just per plan. We now know after 50 years it doesn't work like that.
So what's the culture issue then in an organization? Because, I mean, one of my observations, before I worked at Microsoft, I did a series of startups, and one of my observations is that, you know, the leadership culture, people mirror the founders and the leaders, and so you should be careful how you behave. It's not unlike being a parent, right? So the question I have is more around, as a founder, you have to select some team members. You know, is there a right number or a wrong number? Are there strengths and weaknesses to consider as you bring forward the right mix for this level of customer engagement? Because
Sure.
You're talking about this notion that you have in your book, which is terrific, about sort of how do you get to this minimal viable sort of place with your product before you hit scaling. So talk about the culture and that process a little bit for everybody.
So culture and people really do start with the founder, and it starts, though, with customer development in a very funny way. Because if you're a founder, you had to wake up in the morning with a vision and with a passion to bring that vision to reality. The bad news is that while you don't know it, I know it, you're more than likely hallucinating rather than having a vision. But let's just agree for a second, you might actually be having a vision.
Good coffee.
Right? And if you've seen that burning bush, you're just convinced that all you need to do is lead the people, you know, through the desert and, you know, take a left at, you know, the burning bush and you'll be there 40 years later. But what you really need to know is there needs to be a little voice.
Michael, I couldn't understand what you were saying.
He was starting over the earlier comments I heard. At the beginning. He's starting over again.
There might be an issue with that. So we'll stop there and try to come back and finish the rest of this next week. And there is another video that we will go to that's much shorter version and kind of get us into discussion for tonight. So bear with me 1 second.
And your head is cut off again. You're muted.
I said that's when I lean forward to deal with the equipment. Yeah, so I'll lean back once I get this started.
Two groups are battling. Group called the RSF, Rapid Support Forces, RSF. Both of them were once allies, the Army and RSF. But now they're at war for control. This week, the RSF took control of a city in the Darfur region. The city is called Al Fasher. It was the last major city that the army still held in the region. The army says it withdrew to save civilian lives. But reports from the ground tell a darker story. Satellite images show rows of bodies and pools of blood. Aid groups report executions and ethnic killings. And rights groups say Darfur is on the edge of another genocide. Our next report has more.
Sudan's civil war has entered a new and dangerous phase. After 2 years of war, the country has been split into two. Its army in the north and east, and a powerful paramilitary force now ruling the west and parts of south. That force is called the Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF. And this week it captured the last major city still held by the army in the Darfur region. The city is called El Fasher. It is the capital of North Darfur State. Now it is the latest symbol of Sudan's collapse. For nearly 18 months, El Fasher was under siege, surrounded, starved, and bombed. Then the RSF moved in. Its fighters stormed the army's headquarters, declared victory, and posted videos online claiming control. Sudan's army chief, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, later confirmed it.
Everyone has followed what happened in Al Fasher. Certainly, the leadership there, including security, made assessments that they have to leave the city due to the systematic destruction and killing of civilians. We agreed with them to leave the city and go to a safe place so as to spare the rest of the citizens and the rest of the city from destruction.
For those still trapped in the city, the aftermath has been brutal. Satellite images show rows of what appear to be human bodies. Aid groups have reported executions, beatings, and ethnic killings. The United Nations says many of the victims were shot as they tried to flee. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called it a terrible escalation.
It is clear that we have not only a Sudanese problem with an army and the rapid support forces fighting each other, we have more and more an external interference that undermines the possibility to a ceasefire and to a political solution of the problem.
To be clear, this is not a new war. It began in April 2023. That year, Sudan's two main forces, the army and the RSF, turned their guns on each other. Both had once ruled together after a coup. Both wanted full control, and both have now turned Sudan into the world's biggest humanitarian crisis. More than 12 million people have been displaced. Over tens of thousands of people have been killed. Half the country reportedly faces hunger, and in Darfur, famine has already begun. Darfur has seen this kind of horror before. 2 decades ago, Arab militias called the Janjaweed wiped out non-Arab communities there. Those same militias later became the RSF. They are now accused of doing it again. Witnesses who escaped El Fasher say men were separated, beaten, and shot. Women were spared, only to hear the gunfire behind them. The UN says sexual violence is widespread. Aid workers say the city's hospitals have been bombed, looted, or destroyed. The world's response has been slow but growing. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Qatar, among others, have all reportedly condemned the killings. The UN has called for concrete actions to protect civilians. But the conflict still continues. The RSF denies committing atrocities, but an army-aligned group accuses the RSF of executing 2,000 in El Fasher. Analysts warn the fall of El Fasher could reshape Sudan's war map. It could mark the start of a divided nation ruled by rival forces. Peace talks remain stalled, and famine is spreading fast. For millions caught in between, the war shows no sign of ending.
Want the facts?
The latest developments?
News that gets straight to the point.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back, everyone. I want to start with the last video because I really and truly believe that even those of us here in the United States of America who count ourselves as part of the Islamic Jummah, worldwide Islamic Jummah, that we have given more attention and more credence to what has happened in Gaza. I'm not taking anything away from what's gone on in Gaza, but we've given more attention to that. And I believe simply because the perpetrators of that genocide look like Europeans and they happen to be Jewish. And I do wonder if we would give the same attention to what went on in Gaza if the perpetrators look like African Americans and were Muslims. Because what's going on in Sudan is people who look like us killing, maiming, and raping other people who look like us. And a majority on both sides of the perpetrators on both sides will call themselves Muslim. And we don't talk about it very much. I know that there are people on this broadcast who do and are aware of what is going on there. But for the most part, and part of it is media, very strongly Jewish and Jewish influenced media here in the United States, that controls what we read and a lot of what, if you're watching broadcast television, a lot of what you see on broadcast television. So I understand that element of it, that they're showing and trying to influence what they want you to feel and what they want you to see and what you want to react to. I get that. But I think we have a larger obligation, being a community of Imam W.D. Muhammad, to take a leadership role in the Islamic community worldwide in condemning any negative or harmful actions of Muslims, especially against other Muslims. And Michael, I see your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Again, God's peace and blessings be upon you and the audience. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
The time that we're in now, it's extremely important to distinguish what the religion and its sources are, as opposed to behavior in the name of Islam. It's very important that we repeatedly identify the source of the Holy Quran and the life example of Prophet Muhammad that is in support of that guidance, you know, the way it's presented, its principles and its spirit. It's very important. The Muslim community worldwide is still slumbering, and there are a lot of issues. There's illiteracy issues. There are issues in terms of the support of the two pillars, or I should say the two sources, the Quran and the life of Prophet Muhammad, versus culture that was introduced during times of colonialism, and you know, and also a strategic plan. I remember years ago when they talked about the Sudan, you know, you thought that they were talking about European or Caucasian-looking Muslims, and there was a saying that I came upon some years ago that if you identify, and I was listening to the Arabic, I'm not an expert, but I was listening to the pronunciation of the Arabic words, and it said that area, those Arabic speakers who are African looking, is a more correct form of the Quranic Arabic presentation and less dialect. this is something I learned some years ago. Lastly, there are other areas in the world that Muslims need to be concerned about. I agree the Sudan is being overlooked. And we have, as citizens of America, not just African Americans, we've been socially conditioned to follow certain patterns. You know, the news structure will give us if it bleeds, it leads presentation. And then after a certain period of time, it'll go on to the next thing to make us anxious. You know, there's a lot of fear talk. There are a lot of things that are being shown to excite anxiousness. And I'm finding now that I have to be careful about my health in terms of becoming anxious, because I'm listening to the scientists. Cortisol is produced. That's the fight or flight drug, and it affects our health. It affects our thinking, you know, because of the way it operates in the body. So, you know, we really have to, in my opinion, and let me put it personally, I have to filter. I get a lot of my news through the process that you're doing here right now and from conversations. I get a lot of my news that way because, and I'm finding now they're throwing stuff into the game with this AI, creating these false narratives. I'll wait for the other to discuss the other the other presentation, because I had a problem with him the way he came on, you know, his flippancy about scripture, you know. But what it told me was, I'll go ahead and say it. What it told me is that the material and money and wealth and the material rewards are open to everybody, whether you're a good person or not, whether you're serious about religion or God or not. It's open to everybody. You can be a devil and get all kinds of material gain and power. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I would love to obviously have another discussion with you about other areas of the Islamic world that we should be concerned with. I mean, I know there are some.
I'm going to carry on this
Okay,
conversation
very
because
good.
my guest, I wasn't able to line him up. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I mean, because part of what is going on in Sudan, and a lot of what is going on in Libya, and a small portion of what transpired in Syria prior to this new group kicking the Alawites out, and Bashar Assad with them and their power, their stranglehold on that country, is funded by a group in the Gulf, Arabic Muslim country, that everybody sees as a bright shining star, and they're the ones funding all of this mayhem, or a majority of this mayhem that's going on in the Middle East and North Africa, and that's United Arab Emirates. And Dubai, which everybody wants to visit, is one of the most corrupt places on the face of the earth. And the money that flows through Dubai from sex trafficking, from gambling, and almost any other vice that you can think of is what goes to buy guns and rockets and all these things that flow to Sudan and rebel groups in Libya and lots of other hotspots in Africa and the Middle East. And because they're a friend of the United States and a very good friend of our current resident at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, never a word is said against them, because they act as spies in the Middle East for the United States of America against other Muslims. And still everybody wants to run and kiss that ring and see some bling in Dubai. not knowing that they're funding the demise of al-Islam. And this particular type of lack of knowledge and understanding of what is undermining al-Islam in the world is what concerns me. I sleep well at night. It doesn't directly affect me for the most part, but I do see pain and suffering happening that I know that without some of these actions by some of these very wealthy actors, that pain and suffering would be less for people in the Islamic world. That true knowledge of Quran and Sunnah could flow to people in the Islamic world if these actors did not exist and did not have the currency that they currently have. In the United Arab Emirates, if you're an imam, your khutbah is what the government tells you to say. They virtually send out khutbahs to every imam prior to Friday prayers. And if you deviate from that, there's a very good chance that you will be locked up. That's not al-Islam. I mean, I don't know I've never been to one of their masjids. I don't know what the khutbah is, but something about that rubs me the wrong way, especially when I then see the actions of the government themselves, and that people who speak out against the government, who say that this is not al-Islam, this is not following the Sunnah of the Prophet, that those people are very quickly silenced. There is no shurabanium there. They don't allow for that. You don't have a voice. So, and they're not the only ones. I mean, I'm picking on them a little bit, just because I'm aware of some of the underhanded stuff that they do. But there are probably quite a few governments, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, of course, Turkey to a certain extent, Egypt, who also bend the knee to the West and allow some of these outrages and harmful things to go on. So, and like you say, Michael, a lot of times there's nothing me and you together standing on the top of Mount Arafat screaming at the world, we're not going to get any change done. They'll swat us off in a second, but the Ummah needs to, I guess you would say, the Ummah needs to wake up, be resurrected, and understand these things and what's going on, what's happening to them. So your hand is up again, or did you not take it down?
Yes, it's up again. I agree. And years ago, as I was watching the world scene, I was much more engaged in the news than I am now. Like, again, for self-preservation, keep from getting anxious about, not only anxious, but getting angry with some of the things that I'm seeing. So I limit my news intake. But yes, years ago, I said, well, we just have to outwork them. We don't get the mic. Oftentimes when we do get the mic, a sincere brother or sister gets the mic, it's a setup. They have an agenda to get you to go in a certain direction. And but I've seen how that had gone awry. I remember during 9/11, Sister Hanan Ashwari, a member of the PLO organization, and I'll say for better, clearer identification, she was a Christian member of the Palestinian Liberation Army or organization, PLO, not army. But she was asked about the bombing of the towers, but she said something so profound. She said, we need to understand the environment that creates such a mind, such a person. That was so profound to me, It's like she was like an angel, an angelic force, putting that into the atmosphere. because it is our environmental influences that are created. There was, when the PLO was a lot stronger, I understand that certain elements of the Israeli Zionist government, they were supporting, what's this group now? Hamas. They were supporting Hamas,
Sure.
because there has been a strategy, and some of the worst kind of behavior has been cloaked in the language of the self-interest of the government, of the country. We have to look out for our interests, our economic and political interests. And what that means is dirty tricks. What it means is bad business deals. What it means is an imperialistic mindset cloaked in other kinds of philanthropic approaches, empire building on the backs of bad business deals in Africa and other places, but especially Africa, because it's been thousands of years. What I'm bothered by is places like the Congo have not been getting enough understanding in the news.
Right.
And I mean, for hundreds of years, the resources have been taken out of places like the Congo, and we're hearing about Burkina Faso and Niger and other places with that are presenting a new kind of leadership and leadership thinking in Africa, and that one leader in particular in Burkina Faso, he's had over 20 assassination attempts, because the program is you kill the leaders that are about serving the people, and you establish greedy-minded individuals. This is what's going on over in the Sudan, in my opinion.
Right.
These generals, and a lot of it's over the resources. Oil was found in the South, which had been predominantly Christian, if I understood it correctly. And so the war was set up in terms of Christian Muslim. But now that's changed because we've got these independent sources now, that give us the news and not the propaganda. And then let me stop, because I'm talking. Well, it's 8:00. So
well, you might as well keep talking.
Yeah, let's make the transition. Sister Martha, if you could help us close this out and start the YouTube again, so we'll have a good.
Okay, let me claim host. Let me see. I get here and okay, no. Oh yeah, reclaim host. Okay, I'm going on mute.